Let's talk about inspiration first of all. I have a bold statement that I make, which is to say that I believe that inspiration is more powerful than education alone. And that's not knocking education. I think education is very important, it's very powerful. But of itself, it's not enough. And this is what I discovered on my own journey, because I was, in the eyes of many people, well educated. You know, got my O and A levels and all the rest of it, worked hard, high achiever, come from a cultural background where that hard work ethic is really deeply ingrained in you. And yet, when some of the most testing circumstances of my life came that were very life and death for me, I didn't have an answer. And all my education up to that point could not help me. And this was the start of my journey. My journey really turned when I had a dream in the night, and I had a very powerful dream in the night. And this dream foretold two things. One, it foretold that I was going to go through something pretty awful that would leave me feeling utterly destroyed. But I wouldn't be, I'd feel like that. And the second part of the dream actually foretold that I would go on a journey. And in going on that journey, it showed me my relationship with myself, which was quite poor. It was strong in some ways, but quite poor emotionally. I did not like myself, to put it mildly. So one of the things I want to share with you, and it's one of the first things I say in the book, is that things can change in a moment. It's one of the quotes I put. Things can change in a moment. You can get a promotion, you can move county, you can move country, you can win the lottery, or it could be something adverse. You lose a loved one, somebody's seriously ill. And for me, one of those moments, just to give an example, was when my brother died, and very, very suddenly. He died at 23 years of age. And, you know, I had this view that nobody should die at that age, or even just beyond that. And he died so quickly that by the time I got to the hospital, he was already dead. He was already on a ventilator, basically, holding him up. He died of a brain hemorrhage, and he died on my mother's ward, which must have been incredibly painful for her. And by the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. And one of the things that did to me, first of all, I didn't deal with my grief for 7 years. And one of the things I want to say to you is that if you don't deal with grief, and if you don't deal with conflicting emotions, it will make you ill. It made me ill, not seriously ill, but I contracted a nasty virus, and a debilitating one. And I attribute that directly in part to just not dealing with the grief, because I couldn't handle it. And unfortunately for me, it didn't stop there, because one of the core tragedies that the book refers to is the murder of my sister-in-law by my father. And when that happened, it blew everything else seemingly out of the water, because it was a different type of grief now. And you can imagine there's all sorts of things around that, like the media, the investigation. And I was in the last year of my nurse training when this happened. And I don't know how I got through it, and I don't know how I passed, but I did somehow. But it was in that last year that I had this dream. And I knew it wasn't a dream. And that dream enabled me to get to the truth of what happened before the police did. But that dream was also the turning point for me. And this is the big thing that I want to leave with you, because sometimes, you know, you hear these things and it sounds, oh my God, that's just horrible, that's intense, that's dramatic. And yeah, I guess it's not the stuff that maybe you hear every day. And we always think it happens to someone else until it comes to our door. And the reason to share that with you is, bear in mind what I said about how well educated I was. I fell apart inside. Carried on nursing, very few people knew what was going on. Somehow I managed to keep intact and keep going, because career defined me a lot back in those days, so it was like holding me together. But it wasn't enough, and I started to fall apart slowly but systematically. My father might have been behind prison bars that were made of steel. But with all this guilt, anguish, unforgiveness, bitterness, rage, anger, I was in a prison as well. But my prison bars were not visible. They weren't made of steel, but they were very real. And it was such a powerful moment for me because, again, remember I said it could easily be a blind spot. You ignore yourself. You're busy, you know, wanting to vent your spleen on who's done the wrong, that you can become the blind spot. And I was the blind spot. But remember I said I had a dream about myself, yeah? And in that moment, I said this on a video interview I did, I realized in this moment when that kind of reflection came back, it was like a mirror watching my father and then seeing my own reflection back that, hang on a minute, I'm in a prison too, it's just a different one. And if I don't go on a journey to free myself from that prison, I might as well be in the cell next door. That's what I thought. That's how forcibly it struck me. And that was my big turning point. Sometimes when we start to disconnect with ourselves, and by disconnection I mean we start to move away from who we are. It's subtle. Anyone hear that? You just don't hear it and you don't feel it in your system, but it's going on. That's how it was happening with me. And sometimes it was a bit like that, and I could feel it, but just very, very slowly. And so when my brother died, blamed myself. And then when I went to church and then started having issues with my sexuality, guess which one was the bigger one there? Yeah, because the church say, well, you're gay, you're going to hell. That's what I was taught. And I come from a cultural background, was at that time, you know, young people are much more cool about those things, but back then it was like, couldn't tell anybody. And I struggled for 15 years with my sexuality and absolutely went on a journey of self-loathing and self-hate. And the thing that turned it for me, and I really at that point just wanted out of life. Not that I was going to throw myself in front of her, but passively I was just sitting there saying, and my mantra was, death would be a sweet release. Death, this is just too much. Murder in the family, now my sexuality, you know, and I was just falling apart. So bit by bit I was disconnecting with myself. And one of the biggest awakenings I had was when I realized that I was actually engaging in self-abuse through self-loathing. I might not be slashing my wrist or anything like that on the outside, but emotionally, hate is self-abuse. What is it about me that I deserve to hate myself? Well, I'd say nothing now, but at that time, and not having the tools and the resources to know how to deal with that, you know, I just thought, I'm responsible for everything that's gone wrong. The biggest journey in this was actually going on that journey of self-reconciliation, as I call it. You know, putting myself back together again.